afternoon. Welcome to our DemoForum. For me, this is sort of always the opportunity to get together and celebrate, as Democrats, celebrate the values that we share, and happily the opportunity to get better acquainted not only with one another, but with many of our leaders and our leaders to be. So today it is my great pleasure to introduce Paul Evans. Mike Swaim and I played poker. I'm not sure if I won or lost, but he gets to eat lunch and I get to be up here today. So I'd like to start off, it almost feels like as I look around the room, I'd like to start off by introducing everyone, because it's hard to look around here and not find people that have provided not only energy and resources, but leadership for our party and for our county, for our city, and our state. So, Paul, I think you're in wonderful company. I'd like to sort of do a shout out for a number of people that are here and are recognized. One, my memory isn't perfect. Secondly, sometimes the list falls a little short. So let me go through the list, and then I'd like to provide a moment for self-introductions, and that's particularly going to be true of our candidates for public office in addition to Paul. Those of you who were at the last Democratic meeting had the satisfaction of realizing that well over a third of the people who attended had put themselves in a place for the upcoming election. And that's pretty exciting for the Democratic Party. So I'm just proud to be here with all of you. Let me start off with our elected officials. We have Bob Krebs with the Salem-Keizer Transit Board. We also have Marcia Kelly with the Salem-Keizer Transit Board. Paul Kylo, school board member. Stand up, raise your, there's Paul. And I've already noted Mike Swaim not only has done such a marvelous job for us helping to moderate our forums, but of course was an outstanding former Salem mayor. And so Mike, we're really glad to have you here today. We have a number of our party officials. Rick Hardwick, who is currently chair of the party. Pat Williams, are you here? I haven't been to the back. There you are. Good. Good to see you. We have a number of folks from Polk County. Wanda, who is trying to steal food from my plate, is the chairman of the Polk County Dems. Alan Holland is trying to hide behind some change in appearance I haven't identified yet. But Alan, it's good to see you. You've provided so much leadership across the river. Oh, yeah, but she's going to get to introduce herself. Okay. So I'm not going to take anybody's thunder. We're going to have candidates for office introduce themselves. Okay. So, but thanks. Speaking of folks to recognize, we have our DemoForum team. Andy Bromland has provided leadership for that. Leanne, who's been by his side the whole time. Cassia Quillen, Dave Angan, Steve Kenny, and Roger Kay. Could we please give them a hand? Oh, okay, thank you, Claudia. We have let me see, a couple of folks from Woodburn. Could you please stand up? Okay, even if they don't want to stand, we're always glad to have folks who join us from Woodburn. So now what I'd like to do, and I don't know the fairest way to do it, maybe we'll start with Wanda. Paul, obviously you're going to have more than your moment in the sun, so we'll wait a moment on Paul. But Wanda, could you introduce yourself and let us know what office you're running for? Stand on up.
I'm Wanda Davis, and I'm running for House District 23. I just think it's important that we have a Democrat on the ballot, and I figure if I'm going to be there, I'm going to give it my best shot. I heard a good quote this morning on the radio as I was listening to Adam Plugman, Here's the thing, I gotta tell you, I write things down. He said, if you're not shooting for the impossible, you're not aiming high enough. So, whether or not this is an impossible seat to gain for the Democrats, which I don't believe it's impossible, I'm gonna give it my best shot. So,
Wanda, thanks. Heading up on this way toward the back and to my left, any additional candidates, please? Okay. Around Raymond, Duke, our videographer. Thanks for being here, Raymond. Additional candidates as we come around this side. Look, I guess they're all out knocking on doors. Paul, you chose a good day to be inside.
Don't forget your towel, Joe. Don't forget your towel.
Oh, I forgot myself. Yeah, we will. I am really proud to say that as of yesterday, I've had affirmation of support from some very special people, both upstate and here in our county. And I am running for House District as representative from House District 19, the seat vacated by Kevin Cameron. Thanks very much. Hopefully you'll hear from me sometime down the line. So I now have the pleasure of introducing Paul Evans. And I could spend my time going through his resume, and then we'd leave a couple of minutes for questions, and then we'd adjourn. But I think I'll just try and hit some of the highlights. A lot of us are fortunate in having known Paul. He's been a member, active member, and a values-laden member of the Democratic Party for years. But when I think of Paul and I look at his resume, I think of service, I think of commitment, I think of excellence, I think of leadership. And if you take a look at Paul's resume, it reflects each of those in bright neon lights. Paul's a Salem product, was born here in Salem, raised across the river in Monmouth, and decided at an early age to step out and strut his stuff, and served as one of the youngest city councilors, the age of 18, one of the youngest city councilors ever elected in the state of Oregon, and probably nationally. Served as mayor of Monmouth, has been an educator at Western Oregon, at the University of Oregon, currently teaching at Chemeketa and taking guest opportunities at other public universities in our area. He has served as both an Air Force member and member of the Air Force Reserve, has served overseas, Afghanistan and Iraq, both, I believe, has learned to duck, cover, run, roll, and that was just in politics, has also learned a lot of combat-specific techniques that allows him to be here today, alive and well. And I've known Paul for years. I've walked for him, and I'll tell you I'm walking for him this year. And it's a wonderful experience for those of you who have put feet to the ground when you go door to door. It's a hard thing. Not many of us are hooked up that way. But I'll tell you, it's a wonderful experience to walk and knock on doors and speak on behalf of somebody like Paul Evans. I don't need a script. I've known Paul. I speak from the heart. It's good to speak to independents because Paul has that kind of value system that allows him to listen and respond to the wide spectrum and breadth of needs represented by all of the people in Oregon. And it's a special pleasure then for me to introduce you today to Paul Evans. Please give him a warm welcome.
I keep telling Bill that he shouldn't be walking for me anymore. He has a race to run. And I'm going to put a clock up here so I don't go too long. I have been teaching long enough now that I forget what time it is. So I'm going to ask Mayor Swaim to remind me if it goes too long. To begin with, it's been 8 years since the last DemoForum that I was at. And that was a DemoForum that was just a few weeks before I left for Afghanistan. And this morning, as I tried to figure out what I was going to say. Everybody has a plan. Generally, plans go out the window once you actually stand up to the mic. I drove by the Iraq-Afghan Memorial, where over 140 names are currently etched. It stands for the 7,000 folks that have died and the 80,000 folks that have been wounded. I mention that because sometimes in the rigmarole of politics, in the partisan attempts to try to move from this place to that, we forget that our decisions have consequences. And I want to tell you, on behalf of one of the guys that came out of that experience and has had a community that has helped me, especially the last 3 years, as I've tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Many of the people in this room have truly helped me more than any words I can say. You have all been supportive, you have been friends, you've tolerated me as I've grown up, or at least tried to grow up. And I want to begin today with saying thank you for being who and what you are, for changing the lives of people in Marion and Polk counties, and all the many different hats that you all wear. I know that today we only had a few people introduce themselves because they're candidates, but there's not one person in this room that doesn't have 3 or 4 hats that they wear in service. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about service. I'm going to be talking about the campaign. I'm going to be talking about why 2014 is important. And I'm going to share with you what I think are the major challenges we're facing and what we need to do and how we need to do it. So let's start with the realities on the ground. For the first time in over a decade, House 20 is now incumbentless. It is a seat that is more and more progressive. 14 out of 14 precincts went for Ted Wheeler. 12 out of 14 precincts went for our Attorney General, our Congressman, as well as our Secretary of State. 11 of 14 precincts went for President Obama in 2012. With your help, while I was away in Afghanistan last time in 2006, I was within 12 people, 24 votes, of beating Senator Jackie Winters in the House 20 portion of the Senate district. Unfortunately, of course, we know there's another half, so that happened. But what I'm trying to say is that in this particular campaign, it's not only possible, it is plausible. It is something that we can do, and it's up to us to make sure that when we do it, we do something that matters more than just an election. I believe that in Oregon, especially in the House 20 portion of Oregon, there are blue and red areas, but there's really a lot more shades of purple. And I think that our values, especially at this particular time in history, our values reflect most of the folks that live there. 2014 is, in fact, an interesting year. It represents the last 2 years of a presidency, or at least what's going to happen in the last 2 years of that presidency. We're going to elect a governor, hopefully the same governor. We're going to elect a senator, we're going to elect a congressman, we're going to elect some new city councilors, and we're going to elect, hopefully, some new county commissioners. It is a time for us to realize a new Eden, and that's what I titled today's speech, and that's what I'm going to try to talk about. Because I believe we are better than what we currently reflect as a community, as a state, as a nation. We can do better than a stagnant economy. We can do better than an environment at risk. I think we can do better than being a nation that is sometimes at drift, wondering why we no longer reach for the stars, why we're content with simply trying to compete with the Chinese or trying to pay off our debts. And those are important things, but that's not what made America America. It's not what made Oregon Oregon. Closer to home, we look at the challenges that are before us. We look at an archaic tax system that wasn't good even when it was young. We have obsolete structures and burdensome systems of government service delivery. We really have a bureaucratic framework that was built for the 20th century. It doesn't just need reform. It doesn't just need modernization. It needs a rethinking about what it means to be a citizen in a community in the 21st century. That is, in fact, what we need to be doing. That is what we are hardwired to do in Oregon. We have increased partisan rancor and division over things that seemingly matter less and less. And we have a growing schism between the have-mores, the have-lesses, and the used-to-haves. As I sat there today, I wondered if we are, in fact, the country that is satisfied? Are we truly satisfied with how many kids go to school hungry, with how many seniors struggle to get through the month? Are we satisfied with workers working longer and harder for less? And I don't think we are. I think that most of us in this room have spent a lifetime trying to make our communities and our neighborhoods better. And I think most Oregonians want something bigger than themselves to believe in. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge for 2014 in an election campaign. Because an election campaign shouldn't just be about how many voters we got to the polls versus them. It should be about a vision. It should be about a relationship. It should be about building a team, not just to get past the finish line, but what to do when we get there. My strategy is very simple, always has been, and especially in this campaign, it really will be. We're going to go door to door. We're going to go to every neighborhood. We're going to try to win over every neighbor. Democrats, non-affiliateds, Republicans, Pacific Greens, you name it, we're going to try to talk to them. Because I have a belief that 51% or more actually want a better Oregon. But we also have to decide how we can rebuild Eden. And I use Eden out of respect for former Governor McCall and the book that was written, Fire at Eden's Gate. For our history as a culture, our history as, at least since Western involvement, has been trying to make a place of rugged individuals that work together in common cause. That is the secret of our success, and I think it's been lost over the last 20, 30 years. So here's what I think we need to do. I think we need to focus on building a new Eden that is an oasis of innovation. A new Eden that is a place where every kid, rich and poor, grows up knowing that they can actually have a life where they fulfill some dreams. Maybe not all, but some. I don't think that's too much to ask. A new Eden where, as a community, we recognize the value of labor, we recognize the value of fair wages, and we recognize that negotiation over fair wages is not just something that's nice or should happen, it actually is something that is essential to our character. Because ultimately, the years that we live, the most important thing we can give is our labor. We sometimes forget that in the global hustle and bustle of competitiveness. And ultimately, I think we need to have a new Eden that is a society that is never perfect and never satisfied. A community that is invested in making each and every day just a little bit better than the day before. And it's a big job. Thank you. It's a big job. Every 2 years, people like me in suits and ties or dresses try to explain why we need to do things and how we're going to do them. I think it was Jefferson that said we campaign in poetry and we govern in prose. Here's the difference. I can't stand in the shadow of those 140 plus folks and be satisfied knowing that I haven't done everything I can do with the life that I still have. We live in a time where our decisions have significantly larger consequences than I think they used to because of the rapid pace of time. Soon enough, we're going to become a second-rate country, or we're going to actually realize through the challenges a new chapter in what it means to be an American in a multi-diverse world, what it means to be Oregonian in a challenging time. But it comes to choices. It comes to choices in whether we stand up or whether we stand aside. Now, that's not the problem for anybody in this room. But for those that are going to be watching on television later, those that are sitting there wondering what they can do with the problems that we currently have, I ask to listen for just the next few minutes. Because ultimately, we have to accept the challenges of our time. Each generation is defined not by what they accomplish, but what they try to accomplish. And we've forgotten that sometimes failure isn't bad, that we learn from failure. And I tell you that from personal experience. Many of you know in this room over the last 3 years, I've literally had to put Humpty Dumpty back together again because I finally had to face some of the choices I had made, especially in combat and in other places. As I tell my minister often, there isn't a commandment I haven't broken in thought or deed over the last 20 years. Thankfully, I have friends and family that are forgiving. I have a community that has stood with me. And so far, people believe in the promise of tomorrow rather than my failings of yesterday. I am not a perfect person. I am not standing up as somebody who asks you to believe in everything I've ever done, because some of those things are pretty stupid. And he knows. What I am asking for, and I'm asking for every person in this room and every person that hears these words, is that perhaps it's time to learn from our mistakes. Perhaps it's time to recognize that we have a whole lot more in common as a community, and that though sometimes we screw up, as long as we're trying to help more people than we're trying to hurt, we're on the right path. And that we don't want perfect leaders, but we do want leaders that recognize the importance of sacrifice. We want leaders that are willing to listen, leaders that are willing to admit when they're wrong, leaders that are willing to work every single day to try to make a vision come true. That's what I think is important. And in this campaign, we have a phrase we're trying to see if it will work that I think says basically, for good or ill, the story of Paul Evans in this race. Veteran leadership that can't be bought, can't be borrowed, can't be stolen. Over the last 20 years, I've spent time in elected office as a city councilor, a mayor, a school board member. I spent time working for Governor Kulingoski as a senior policy advisor. I've started and didn't do so great on one small business, the other one's doing okay. I get to teach, which is actually, I like to tell my therapist, my therapy. And at the end of it, every day I get to live in a place that to me is very special. It's a place that gave me the opportunity to learn and grow. It's a place, as a middle-class kid, that allowed me to have a pretty cool life. But that's not what we have today. So it goes back to leadership. It goes back to what type of leaders and followers we're going to be, what kind of leaders and followers we're going to demand. And in this race, there's going to be a whole lot of money spent come fall trying to convince folks that all experience is the same. I'm here to tell you, I don't think you can govern well unless you've been in the fight, been in the trenches, been in those long budget meetings, listened to upset folks, perhaps driving their four-wheel drives up on your front yard, which can happen in Monmouth, I know. You want leaders that recognize that at the end of the day, their goal isn't to try to be some big name on some big board, though I did like it today. It's ultimately to be a facilitator for helping people come together, for helping build teams, and for moving the ball down the field just a little bit. Now, in this campaign, we're going to actually try to do that while we're running for office. We're going to have 6 forums. The first one is March 31st at Shemecket at Yola. For those of you that haven't been up there, it's a really nice facility that your tax dollars have gone to build. It's the Viticulture Center. We're going to talk about jobs in our economy. We're bringing together small business owners. We're bringing together folks, county commissioners. Representative Tobias Reed is actually going to be a part of the panel as well. He's currently the House Chair of Transportation and Economic Development. We're going to have a series of these forums, and at the end of the forum, we're going to actually ask for volunteers to work on policy ideas so that November 6th, regardless of whether I win or lose on November 5th, November 6th, we're going to have 6 packets of legislative concepts to begin conversations about things that matter to our people here, and with advocates ready to go and testify to make change happen in our reality. Now, for those of you that don't know me, and some of you we have not met, we've not talked about different ideas, I know in a campaign it's sometimes important to know what a candidate believes. So here's the laundry list. I hope it doesn't put you to sleep. I believe Oregon can become a new Eden when we guarantee opportunity for all. That doesn't mean guarantee success, because I think that work and labor is important, but it does mean everybody gets an opportunity to succeed. And there's systems we can build for education and workforce readiness that we have not yet done, and we need to do that. I believe Oregon can become a new Eden when we provide a safe environment, which is not just safe streets and secure borders. It's healthy air, healthy lands, healthy waters. It is the entire environment that when the rest of the world goes the way of globalization, they look to Oregon and go, wow, you can actually drink the water and not grow a second head. You can actually grow crops without poisoning your people. You can actually breathe the air without having to have 13 inhalers. We can do those things. I believe Oregon can become a new Eden when we protect our basic rights. Not just to think, to act, and to live, but to love whom we choose to love. And we should have an environment in that new Eden where we can do that without fear. Events lately across the pond of the Atlantic remind us that there are countries where fear is still a very present danger. I celebrate the sacrifice of folks that every day, in all the different ways that they serve, make our community different in that environment, but we cannot ever forget that each of us has to make sure and provide those same protections, those same basic rights to the next generation. I believe Oregon can become a new Eden when we promote the future even as we provide in the present. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's hard to set aside things for the future. Sometimes it's hard to be good stewards. But at the end of the day, somebody set something aside for us, or we would not have water to drink, land to live on. I also believe that Oregon can become a new Eden when health care, including reproductive health for women, is a reality always, not just a political chit that's used from time to cause fear or to evoke a political outcome. And ultimately, I believe Oregon can and will become this new Eden when all of us recognize that with rights and privileges come responsibilities. Again, this is not new to the folks in this room. But I tell you, every day in the classroom, I try to help explain through communication how in this country we try to change and make progressive change through the ballot, not the bullet. How we can, in fact, use words and language to move people to action, and why it's important for those that have been given a special trust, those attending public schools, to live up to making the public better for the folks that follow them. You know, sometimes inspiration comes from strange places. As I was preparing for today, I was reminded of the scriptures. Now, I don't know if many of you are familiar with Numbers 22, but it's a funny little story that I think is important for us here today, especially gathered as Democrats. Hopefully you'll find the humor. It's a story about a man named Balaam. Balaam was a man that lived his faith, at least he thought he did. He wasn't any worse or better than his neighbors. But one day he was sent to help. He was sent to help a fellow by the name of Balak. Remember his responsibilities to his faith, his family, and himself. In this story, Balaam's donkey was used as the communicator. The voice of heaven actually spoke through the donkey to get the man's attention. Now, I happen to believe that God could have chosen any other animal. He could have chosen a squirrel, a dog, a kitten. He chose a donkey. He didn't choose an elephant. He chose a donkey. A donkey that spoke truth to power. A donkey that was a guide to living up to your responsibilities. Now, I'm not here to tell you what faith to have or to have any faith at all. That's your own path. But I will tell you that there is a universal power of faith in the larger sense. Faith in something larger than ourselves. Hope that tomorrow can be better than today. And love. Loving people enough to sacrifice an hour here or a few dollars there. Loving your neighbors enough, even if you don't know them or don't understand why they're doing it, because ultimately somebody loved you even when you were relatively unlovable, or at least in my case, when I was unlovable. I believe that we are always at our best when we recognize those three truths. In the end, I want to start with the beginning. We have a lot of work to do in 2014. No campaign can promise everything to everybody, and there are times I will probably frustrate you and make you pull out hair or throw things or want to throw things. All I can promise is this. You gave me a chance. You gave me support 8 years ago when you didn't have to. You've loved me ever since. You've made a tremendous difference in my life. And over the last 3 years, as I've gone through a process of trying to figure out what matters and why it matters and how we can move from here, you will never find a more committed person to our values, to our ideals, and to living up to the responsibility of the 140 kids that are up on that wall, Pat Griffin, who was my own sergeant, who is on a wall down in Florida, or the 7,000 kids that never get to come home, or moving away from war, the kids that go to school hungry, the seniors that don't know if they can pay their rent, the folks that struggle every day to pay the mortgage so their kids can have something that they didn't have. We can do better. We have to do better. I want to close with some comments that are not unfamiliar to you, but always bring me a little bit of a smile. Some of you may remember Margaret Mead. She told us that never doubt a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This campaign, I'm not just asking you for your vote and your time and your energy, though I'm asking for those things. I'm asking you to help be a part of something in changing our part of the world this year and sending a message across the state, across the region, across the country, that we don't have to depend upon partisan rancor. We don't have to play on our divisions. We don't have to play on the worser angels of our nature. Here in Oregon, we can build a new Eden based on community. We can build a new Eden based on open discussion. We can build a new Eden based on respecting each other. We can build a new Eden upon each of us doing what we can, when we can, where we can, because it matters. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
We've got plenty of time for questions for Paul, so if you just raise your hand, we have a microphone that'll come around to you.
Sure. I once flew across the Atlantic sitting behind Margaret Mead in America.
Really?
One of my classmates actually sat next to her, who was invited to go to her home when they got back to the United States.
Really?
My question though is about a special session was held to address the GMO issue.
Yes.
And what they did is they said no county or individual organization in the state except one could pass laws having to do with GMO.
Right.
Would you mind addressing that? Because I think GMO is going to be of serious concern to everybody in the future.
Sure. The question has to do with GMOs, and GMO is genetically modified organism. At least that's one of the definitions. There's some other phrases I'm not sure I can use on camera that describe them. It is going beyond traditional, what the Grange, that I'm still a member out at McClay, would say is the husbandry of crops. It goes actually into taking different genetic stock from different types of critters and putting them back in. So the one that's used a lot of the time is a particular type of vegetable. I think it's a tomato that has salmon and other types of fish genes in it, so it looks redder, longer, and under colder circumstances. I'll tell you, as a vet who gets to go to the VA because of some of the drugs that were given in anticipation of certain types of activities, I'm always a little bit nervous when they say, well, we think it will do this. So I have a personal commitment to knowing what we're putting in our food stream before we actually allow it. So in this particular issue, I'm actually comfortable with Katie Koba having a lot to do with that particular decision because I trust Katie Koba. It's probably not the solution I would have come up with. I think that as a state, we need to have very strict standards. There's a reason the Europeans and other countries don't allow GMOs. There's a reason that agribusiness really wants to do it, and generally, if Monsanto wants to do something, I'm suspect and don't want to do that something because there's something I don't know. And more importantly, I don't know that we need it. I mean, quite frankly, what I want to do is I want to help agriculture and forestry, but do it in small business ways, doing it in sustainable ways, doing it in ways where we can market healthy goods. The whole idea of Oregon is supposed to be this healthy, wonderful place. Well, why would we throw that away by focusing on trying to produce GMOs? It just doesn't make sense to me. So that's probably more of an answer than you wanted, but I will do what I can to make sure that we have a very consistent policy, and I'll, quite frankly, try to stop GMOs as much as I can. Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
And welcome back.
Thanks.
I'll get right to the point. I wonder if there's any pressure that the legislature can put on large employers like Walmart and McDonald's to increase the wage that they're paying their employees. You know, in the last several years, there's been a lot of focus on PERS, but how much PERS costs to the ordinary taxpayer, but actually, the supports that taxpayers are funding Walmart and McDonald profits. The supports we put to those large employers
Right.
that pay minimum wage is probably much, much greater than the whole PERS support in the state. And I think it's time to focus. For some reason, there's been a blind spot in the newspapers and everywhere else. They've all had this story about PERS, but no one has mentioned taxpayer support for the employees of Walmart.
Well, let's take that question and break into a few pieces, if I could, Pat. First is, I'll start with the last first. I'm a public employee that used to be Tier 2, but when I got laid off and had to pay bills, I had to cash out my PERS. So I'm now Tier 3 or whatever it is, the individual thing. So when I talk about PERS reform, yeah, I'm a public employee, but it's really probably not going to help me a whole lot. I say that because when I was a mayor and tried to live up to the example of Mayor Swayman, I always failed, but I tried. He taught me a lesson about negotiations that I haven't forgotten. And when I was mayor and I had to negotiate with the police department, for example, we couldn't afford the wages to compete with other cities. We couldn't afford a lot of things, but we made a deal in terms of retirement, and we made a deal in terms of health care. I gave my word when I was a mayor, and when it comes to PERS, whatever the case, my word still is there. So I don't agree with what was done before, and I'm on the hook right now to try to find ways to make sure that we keep faith with our public servants. To me, serving the public for a career, especially knowing that there's different incentives in the private sector and everything else, I think that there was a fair bargain that I don't understand why it was changed. Having said that, moving to the next piece about the Walmarts of the world and McDonald's. My approach to the economy is hold one, fight one. And here's what I mean by that. Any Oregon company, an Oregon company to me means 50% of the employment force in the state of Oregon, living and breathing. Any Oregon company that has to have particular issues, I will work very hard to keep them here while we grow a new economy of smaller businesses. McDonald's and Walmart are not Oregon companies. So I'm up for pretty much anything to help them recognize that they should change, and at the same time building an economy that basically forces the work environment to where they have to pay better wages because they're no longer the steady job. We have a more vibrant economy. So that's my approach. That's one of the reasons why we're starting with Jobs in Our Economy as the first forum on March 31st. I believe that the changes of the 21st century, especially after traveling so much in Asia over the last couple of years, things are changing so fast, we have to come up with an innovative economy for small businesses. We know for a fact that over the last 5 years, the thing that has actually kept us afloat has not been the larger businesses. They've actually been shedding jobs. It's been the small businesses, 20 and less. So we've got to build tools to help them. We've got to build tools to help innovation, to help inventors that have new ideas, that can basically wrap our arms around them and help them grow jobs in the economy. And ultimately, two things will happen. One, McDonald's and Walmart and the boys will either decide to pay more or they'll find somewhere else to go because we'll have better alternatives.
Follow up with this whole discussion on jobs and so forth.
Yeah.
Recently, we came to some kind of a compromise on the sale of timber out of the Elliott State Forest and Rio and Sioux lands.
Yep.
And I've always been a little puzzled by this because it's always said that, well, they need the revenue and they need to have the jobs from selling timber as a natural resource as opposed to doing what Kitzhaber recommended, at least 8 years ago or 10 years ago when he was campaigning, which is doing value added. So I'm unclear why we are selling raw logs to Japan and then re-importing finished lumber back from them at an increased profit. Why are we not investing in the finishing plants and the milling facilities and creating more high-paid jobs that way? And what do you think we can do about that?
Well, good question, complex question. Here's my best shot at it. Number one, I don't think I can change the exports overnight, but what I'm concerned about is a problem that we really haven't faced, at least prior to the last 15 years. We as a community hadn't faced it. Used to be back in the day, whenever there was a downcline in the economy or things got bad, people were laid off, but the mills and the equipment in the mills stayed there. Somewhere along the line, somebody, it's always that somebody that doesn't have a name, somebody incentivized companies not just laying workers off and shedding workers for profitability, which never has made sense to me, but to actually sell the equipment and sell the mills. So even if we wanted to put folks back in the mills like they were in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, we couldn't do that because the equipment's not there. I know. A business I was working for a couple years ago, we tried to buy an equipment that's very similar to making plywood, and we couldn't find one in the state of Oregon that was for sale because they were all gone or being used or had a particular market. So we have a bigger problem, I think, than trying to add value to the natural resources. Now, having said that, going back to the discussion about small business innovation, what I think the long-term strategy is to try to build ourselves a way to get back into uses of sustainable uses of natural resources that add value and stop some of the corporate welfare that currently has been going to the larger companies that no longer have headquarters here, no longer really care about us. We're kind of a colony for them. And much like with the Brits, perhaps it's time to let them go their own way. But we have natural resources. I think we do have to get folks back in the woods. I think that we can do things smartly. I've never been one to believe that we have to cut every tree, because quite frankly, if you look at market economies, the longer a tree grows, and quite frankly, the more special it is, the more price it's going to get. So I never have understood trying to approach it just like a field of wheat. But we can, I think, put together, again, based on small employers, regional strategies that actually can help us build our way back to using a better balance with stewardship. But I don't like the raw logs going overseas. I don't like helping China build their economy with our stuff. I don't like the way in which some of the fishing programs have been. I don't like the way that we've allowed our lands to be used by folks that have no investment in Oregon except for the profits. So I'm with you, at least philosophically. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
I listened to your vision, and it's a land I would emigrate to in a minute.
We're going to need people.
But what I'm thinking is that your vision is really an experiment, a laboratory, using the state as a laboratory of democracy.
Yep.
And I imagine that another part of your mind is thinking what influence this experiment can have on federal politics as a model.
Yes.
And I would like to hear you articulate that if you could.
Sure. To get to that point of kind of the larger vision, I want to talk about the first three things I want to work on if I get elected that I think can help move that along. First is, I call it QEM plus 3. Once upon a time, we had this idea for education in the state of Oregon. It was called Quality Education Model. It made sense. It explained in simple terms to someone like me who doesn't understand math very well, simple terms, how many teachers per student, how many support staff, the whole 9 yards. It made sense to me. We need to, I think, dust it off a little bit, make it for the modern classroom, and then add 3% for every school district, and that 3% is for regional, local tailoring for workforce preparedness. Because we have to have that critical link between training our folks to go to work and actually work for them to do. Second piece is, one of the things I think we have to get back to is we have to define the difference between real personhood and not real personhood, because we cannot make some of the fundamental changes we need to without some reform in our governance, and that's just not going to happen as long as money comes down like water. Third piece is I want to institute civics education in every grade that you're in school. We build some of the best workers on the face of the planet, but we build really bad citizens. And how can you sustain the most complex system of governance in human history? Because we are that. We have so many local governments, so many special districts. We are a living democracy. But we've not prepared the folks that are inheriting that democracy to make it work. So those are the three things I want to do. Now, the larger vision to me is we're never going to be, and probably for good cause, we're never going to be the most powerful country on the planet without we can just dictate this or that or the other. And I'm actually more comfortable with us not having that ability. One of the things I have asked for, and again, this takes a little bit of time to explain, but I've been a member of something, the Military Families Committee of the Democratic National Committee for a while. And some of you have talked to me over the campaign about, why is he always talking about military issues? Well, one of the reasons I've talked military issues is because they've asked me to talk about military issues. And one of the things I've been advocating for is rethinking our national defense structure from what was never intended to be the case, a full-time military, to a traditional cadre system, which plays upon the National Guard far more than the active duty. Here's basically the 2-second tour on that. We could treble the size of the National Guard, create job training for literally millions of people, and have a military that could do anything we needed to do when we're attacked, and be far less able to be used just because some president somewhere wants to go find weapons of mass destruction that ever existed. So when I talk about the country I believe in and want to change the nature of how we see ourselves, it's across the board. It's from what citizens view their responsibilities as, it's the economies focusing on small employers, it's on stewardship and value-added economics to make sure that what we export to China, what we export to the tigers in Asia, has our best value in it and our best interest in it. It's little things like making sure that if in fact, and again I know there's people on both sides of this, but if we're going to build more tunnels and if we're going to build more pipelines, that they're coated with materials that actually make sure that we aren't destroying the environment. I mean, there are smart things we can do that we can demand that we just haven't done because it's not profitable. And it's not profitable, which translates into some poor policy because of, I think, the untoward power of certain types of corporations and the ability with Citizens United to buy your way, like the Koch brothers are, to having your own Senate. I didn't fight a war to make sure the Koch brothers could have their own Senate. Yeah.
Yes, Paul, I'm on the Salem Housing Advisory Commission Board, and we voted to get so many dollars a month for low-income veterans.
Yeah.
Now with the urban housing in Washington, with the cuts and stuff, now they want to raise, they want to raise money, a portion of the rent the Salem Housing Authority pays for me.
Right.
Now it may increase my rent too, and it's gone beyond my means now, and what can we do about that? And also, I want to thank you for your service to the Shrimp Reserve, and I alerted you to a couple situations, and you and the governor stepped in, and I called you and Jim Willis, Top Guns, and Mrs. Secretary over there for Jim Willis. I always said, well, which Top Gun can I talk to? She says, well, you've been watching too many Top Cruise movies.
Well, Tom represented the Navy and I'm Air Force, so just on go Air Force. Thank you for, first of all, thanks for serving on the Housing Board. I have two things on housing. One is kind of macro, one is micro. Macro, once we get this healthcare thing worked out, which I think with Obamacare we will, and the Cover Oregon thing someday will, it's a fundamental, to me it's a fundamental right, and oh, by the way, from a business perspective, if I'm a business and I don't have to pay healthcare because we all are healthier people, and people are more productive when they show up to work and they're not calling in sick because they're overworked. I mean, it just makes sense. To me, the next step after healthcare is housing. Doesn't make sense if we're the United States of America to have people homeless unless they're choosing to be homeless. And I understand in some cases that some people choose that, but we're better than that. Now, with veterans home or veterans housing, one of the things I actually tried to push from the outside, and one of the reasons I'm running is because my influence pushing from the outside, they're kind of stopped, they're tired of listening to me, is trying to work with some of the home builders in the area that had a large inventory of homes, and basically to slough off some of their inventory so they get back in the business of building homes where they should be built, not where they shouldn't be, but where they should be built. Putting some of those homes into a trust that's managed by the ODVA and letting veterans basically either a long-term lease to buy or at least short-term ways so that the market could adjust and we could get those houses off the inventory and people could be out from living in the sagebrush or under bridges. Now, that didn't go very far for a number of reasons. I plan on revisiting it probably from a different perspective if I am elected. But I think Eric Shinseki's goal of ending homelessness among veterans before he leaves office is not just laudable, but it's possible. And I don't believe that we should just focus on veterans. I actually think every American, if you're going to live here and we're going to require you to work and we're going to require you to make your community better, there's certain, I think, things that you can expect. Healthcare, housing, fair workplace, I think are reasonable. Right. Right. Shouldn't be pushed out of a place to live just because you have to pay for the meds. Anyway, I think we're getting closer. Is one last question, I'm told. One last question.
Marion, I was pleased to hear you talk about tax reform.
Yes.
So many times, we talk about tax reform, but we're only talking about it on the state level, and the issues of Measure 5 and Measure 4750
Yes, ma'am.
are impacting every small district. So
Yeah.
what do you foresee trying to talk about this complicated issue?
Okay, well, I've been counseled not to talk too much about the grand vision, but first, I believe, because I was actually on the city council, though it's hard to remember that long ago, but I was on the city council in 1989, 1990 when we put together the permanent rates, and I can tell you that they were arbitrary and capricious. I use that term very specifically. At the time, we thought that whatever rate we came up with could be increased 6% every year, because that was the deal, so some trades were made, and that's the permanent rates we got. Grand Moff McIntyre and Darth Sizemore came along with Measure 47 and 50 again and limited to 3% growth. And what happened is if you get into a situation, which we have, to economic problems, you can never catch up. So you're constantly cutting, which is in fact what they tried to do, is a different variation of put the government in the bathtub and drown it, okay? So there's two things I think we need to do. Number one, the first thing I'd like to try to accomplish, if elected, is I'd actually like to put a $2 plus up in the $10 scheme for seismic rehabilitation capital construction. And I say that because everything should be refit for seismic rehabilitation now that we know that we're, I think, on year 3 or 4 over of the 400-year earthquake that's going to come. It is a way, just like Eisenhower built the roadway system, I think, to justify important capital investments that could theoretically free up some operations capital in other areas. That's the first piece. Second piece is I want to look at forming public safety districts that can take some of the pressures off cities trying to provide police, fire, everything that they're currently trying to provide, because I'm not sure that they can keep up with the Joneses that way. Now, the big thing is ultimately at some point somebody, perhaps not me, but somebody braver than me, should find 2 or 3 cities and 2 or 3 school districts that have comparable populations and sue the state for violation of the 14th Amendment. Because ultimately, if the state is in fact enforcing the measures, and it is arbitrary and capricious and has been from the beginning, different people are getting different services if they're the citizen of the same state. Now, it may not fly, but it will certainly open the conversation, because I don't think we can actually have, in the state of Oregon, because of the one issue standard for ballot reform, we can't say we're going to change the property tax and do income and do this because it's more than one issue and it'll be kicked out. So we have to make a bigger mess that folks are a little more afraid of to actually come to the table and bargain for a tax system that makes sense for the 21st century. Now, I'm not smart enough to know what that tax system would look like. I am smart enough to know that we can't continue to do the same thing over and over again and watch our future just disappear. And I'm committed to having those types of conversations and to facilitating those conversations, and I believe I can do it better than any other candidate in this race because I've been a mayor, I've been a school board member, I've worked at the state, and I know firsthand the kinds of trades and the kinds of trade-offs that we've been living with, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and we don't have to. We are smarter than this, we are better than this. So that's my approach. Again, in case people are asking, I'm probably not going to be the one trying to sue the state on these types of things, but somebody somewhere needs to explore how in which we got not just 4750, but how those permanent rates were put in the first place, and why it's okay for some people in the state of Oregon to have a better life than other people just because of the community that they live in, because of the permanent rates that provide more or less police coverage, more or less library access, more or less school service, more or less transportation. It's wrong. Thank you very much.
Deep breath. There's a lot of good information and a lot of visioning for all of us, and I think it's a good opportunity to sort of beat the drum for let's make sure we get out there and support the kind of vision that Paul and our other candidates are offering to the electorate this year. It's 1 o'clock. We give people the opportunity to head out as close to 1 as possible. If you need to leave, feel free to sneak out, particularly the back, but we do want to allow time for some important announcements. So Rick, Marcia, I have one if nobody else is brave enough to get up and share it. So Rick, why don't you come on up, and then Marcia, why don't you follow?
First of all, thank you, Paul, for being here, and we are here to assist you in any way we can. And thank you, Andy, and the DemoForum team for all their hard work to put on these. I have 2 items for you. First is kind of nuts and bolts of one of our goals is that we are a viable county party. And to do that, we do need to raise money. We have our auction, dinner auction on Saturday, April 26th. You all have flyers there out in TV land. Go to our website and you can download the reservation form. We will be announcing our speaker any time now. It is our major fundraiser, and we definitely need to have it be very successful because like every other election, this election is the most important election we've ever had. Okay, next one is one that Paul talked about, is in terms of vision. Every 2 years, the state party puts together a platform, and every county is allocated so many delegates, and actually we are allocated 1 delegate for every 1,000 Democrats in Marion County. We have 52 possible delegates and 26 alternates. We'd love to have competition for those 52 delegates. Right now, if you are a registered Democrat in Marion County and would like to be a part of the process that provides the vision for the state party, there's a clipboard up here. Put down your information. It will be on May the 30th through June 1st in the Portland area, and I encourage you to become involved. If you are from Polk County, Polk County has allocated so many delegates, and you need to talk to Wanda, who just left. And I encourage you to be part of that process. If you want to check out the current platform, you can just go to dpo.org and find it there. So get involved. We need your help. We need your help financially to keep us going, and we need your vision for our platform. There also are donation forms up here. I'm giving one right now to Bill, who is donating an item for our auction, and the mayor is filling one out right now as we speak. He wouldn't do it when Paul was speaking, but he'll do it now. Thanks a lot. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much, and let's keep the ball rolling.
Two real short announcements. This Saturday, March 29th, there's a Salem Audubon-led bird identification walk at Fairview Wetlands that's sponsored by Pringle Creek Watershed Council. Meet at 8 a.m. at the Fish and Wildlife parking lot, which is right across from an area where you can access the trail. There's a trail through the wetlands that has been constructed, so it's a pretty easy walk, and it's suitable for all ages. There are going to be 3 Salem Audubon Society members there helping identify, and it's a really good time to see birds that are sort of on their way one way or the other, and there have been some strange things spotted in past years. And putting on my transit hat, Wednesday, April 2nd at 2 p.m., there'll be a rededication of Courthouse Square. There'll be tours of the building following that, and there are going to be some shuttle buses, but I can't remember where they're coming from. And so look in the newspaper for more details, but the tours of the building will run until 6 o'clock that night.
So it's safe.
The people who have reconstructed the U.S. Supreme Court and the Guggenheim Museum in New York and some of the Frank Lloyd Wright houses and LaGuardia Airport's runway have done this. They only do reconstruction, and they do it all over the world, so it's safe.
That's good.
Though we regret they did such a good job on the Supreme Court.
Well, this is another cultural announcement. As many of you know, I sing with Festival Chorale Oregon, and we are doing our spring concert. It will be Bach's major choral masterwork, the Mass in B minor. This is the most complicated choral work ever written. And we're doing it for the first time. We're doing 2 performances, one on April 26th that will be downtown at the First Presbyterian at 7:30. And the second one will be the following day at St. Mary Church in Mount Angel at 4:30 in the evening. That will be a Saturday and a Sunday. And I have tickets. They are $20 for general, 18 for seniors, and $5 for students. And I really suggest that you take a look at this and think about coming, because it should be just a fabulous performance. And there are little cards like this, reminder cards that you can take home and stick on your refrigerator if nothing else. Thanks.
Last but not least, I'd like you to mark your calendars for May the 1st. It's a Thursday evening, 7 o'clock at the Grand Theater downtown, which, if you haven't visited it, is a lovely, lovely venue. We're going to have the premiere showing, at least in Salem, of the healthcare movie. Talks about how they approach some of the same healthcare dilemmas and issues in Canada that we're currently faced with and have been faced with the past several decades here in the United States. A very moving film, a lot about people willing to give and share and compromise because they feel it will benefit their neighbors, they feel it'll benefit the general good. I had an opportunity to see a preview of that film and was very, very impressed. It's a $5 donation. And we're going to have as a special opportunity the 2 producers of the film who will be on a tour during the last, national tour during the last 3 weeks of April. So you not only get the Salem premiere of the healthcare movie, you have an opportunity to dialogue with the producers. Wonderful opportunity, especially for those of us like Paul and I and Wanda, who are faced with healthcare reform as one of the major issues to make Oregon that kind of Eden that Paul outlined for us. Thanks so much for being here. Look forward to the next announcement for our next forum. Is there a date yet set for our next forum?
It will be 2 weeks from, it'll be the 16th, I think it is.
16th of April?
Yeah, and it will be Diana Dickey. And then
Running for county commissioner.
County Commissioner, we're going to probably have a whole series of kind of local races, probably 1 week for a while. The following week, well, on the 23rd, we're going to have the 3 candidates in Ward 2, Salem City Council.
Excellent.
And we'll probably have some other Salem City Council people up the following week if I can get it scheduled. So.
I have a question, Andy, and maybe some of the others in our leadership position. If I was a Republican, I would want to also hear, you know, from the candidates who are going to be leading my community and my county and my state in the future, do we have an open door policy? I mean, invitation open for Republicans who might like to join us for these informational opportunities?
Well, generally, I have just invited progressive candidates and Democrats because I don't think this would be considered a very fair